Closure is an unhelpful goal in grief because it requires you to stop being human. None of us is capable of that. Implying that it is possible or a worthwhile goal to simply close the book on a person, a relationship, a season of your life, a part of yourself, suggests that you are capable of a black and white compartmentalization that just isn't a thing that humans are capable of doing. Hi there, Grief Growers, and welcome back to another episode of Grief Grower. I am so honored to be here with you today, as always. If you've been growing alongside me in my work for a while, welcome back. And if you are new to me and my work, hello. My name is Shelby Forsythia. I am a grief coach, a 3-time author, and the founder of an online community called Life After Loss Academy, where I have helped thousands of grieving people stop feeling lost, stuck, broken, and alone, and start building lives they love from the lives that loss forced them to live. I joke around here that I cover not just death-related losses, but also divorce and major diagnosis, the 3 Ds, death, divorce, diagnosis, as well as any other major loss that changes your life. Here on Grief Grower, we believe that grief is not something to get over. It is something that we grow with, and that by treating grief less like a problem to be solved and more like an invitation to live more deeply, we can create meaningful lives that are rich with all the memories that we carry, the struggles that we faced, and the preciousness of what it is to be alive right here and right now. Before I get into today's episode about closure being a garbage myth, a reminder that release day for my 3rd book, Of Course I'm Here Right Now, 3 actually helpful things to say to someone grieving, is coming up in less than 1 month on March 31st. This little guidebook teaches you how to support a grieving person in your life with the best free tool that any of us has, and that is our words, so that you will never enter another conversation with someone who's grieving wondering, what on earth do I say to support them? As an author, pre-orders are super helpful when it comes to getting the book seen by bookstores and the marketing powers that be, so you can find a link to pre-order Of Course I'm Here Right Now in the show notes. If you have already pre-ordered the book, thank you so much. You could submit your receipt number, no photos required, from Bookshop, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or your local indie bookstore on my website to access a free 6-week book club where we will read Of Course I'm Here Right Now cover to cover and discuss it together as a group. This book club kicks off in mid-April, so make sure you have the book in your hands and submit your pre-order receipt before then. And lastly, if you would like to celebrate the launch of this book with me, I would love to see you at one of 2 launch parties. The first is taking place the eve before the book debuts into the world on March 30th here in Chicago. We will celebrate with an author talk, an interview with my friend and podcast host Emily Washkovic, and treats that are themed for the book. Why, yes, I did get an entire tray of treats that match the book cover Of Course I'm Here Right Now. Dress code is white and blue to match the book, and you will receive a book along with your ticket that I can sign when you come. The next launch party is the day the book comes out, March 31st on YouTube in the evening, so no matter where in the world you live, you can tune in to hear more about the clients and interactions that inspired this book, about what to say to someone who's grieving, plus hear me read excerpts live. And of course, the replay of that virtual event will be available for free if you can't attend live. You can save your spot for both of these launch parties at the link in the show notes for this episode. Now let's get into one of my all-time favorite things to whine about and complain about in grief world, which is that closure is not a helpful goal for anyone in grief, and how to heal without it. Maybe you have heard the phrases floating out in the world or directed directly at you. You just need to find closure. Or once you get closure, you won't feel so bad. Or simply inquiring, have you found closure yet? Closure is one of the most common words used to describe healing from grief, but it is also one of the most harmful in my personal opinion. Whether you are navigating one of the 3 Ds, death, divorce, diagnosis, or another loss like an estrangement, a job loss, pet loss that meant your life did not go the way you thought it was going to, I bet somewhere, some way, somehow, you have been told that healing requires closure. There is this myth that if you just have the right ritual, the right conversation, the right mindset about your loss, that you will finally be done, grieving and permanently be able to release grief's sticky hold on your heart. You are probably told that if you achieve closure, the pain of your loss will feel wrapped up and resolved and complete. But experience with grief and more than a decade of supporting grieving people has taught me that there is no such thing as closure. Which leads me to ask, what if closure is not the goal of grief at all? So in this episode, I am challenging one of society's most accepted ideas about grief and offering you something more compassionate and more honest and frankly more sustainable instead. So if you are sick of chasing the idea of closure, this episode is for you. So I want to start off by talking about what is closure exactly. When people talk about closure and grief, they usually mean one of a few different things. This could be a sense of emotional resolution. It could be feeling at peace with what happened, whatever the hell that means. This could be no longer feeling intense pain, which is a goal for many grievers. It could also be being able to, air quotes here, move on without looking back. To me, the word and the idea of closure both imply a sort of finality. Something has been finished, something has been done, a sealed door. It suggests that there is this point where grief should be completed, like a task that you check off a list. But we all know that grief does not work that way. Grief is not a problem to be solved or even a chapter of a book to close. It is a reflection of love or attachment or meaning or identity, and our relationship to all of those things does not simply end because we want it to, or because other people tell us that they should. There is a sort of invisible pressure that the idea of closure puts on to grieving people. In the work that I teach on this podcast, Grief Grower, every article I've ever written talks about how the losses that we face have an impact on our lives forever. Sure, we may not be sad forever, but we will be grieving forever. We will identify as grievers. We will be people who have lost someone or something forever. This might look like remembering a loved one who died through rituals or stories. This could look like taking lessons about relationships that have ended into future relationships after a divorce or breakup. This could be adjusting your life to accommodate a major diagnosis, or simply living with the understanding that grief is an inherent and permanent part of being human. The idea and the missive, the to-do task that you should get closure after a loss often creates this invisible but heavy pressure. It is pressure to feel better faster. It is pressure to forgive or forget maybe before you're ready. It is pressure to stop talking about the person or the relationship that you lost. And it is pressure to tidy up something that feels like it's not tidy. It will never be done. It will never be finished. So when closure doesn't come after a loss, a lot of grieving people assume, and kind of rightly so, that they're doing grief wrong. But what I want to reassure you of, if closure has been something that you are chasing, is that you are not. The problem is not that you can't find closure. It is that closure is not a good goal in grief. Here's why. Closure is an unhelpful goal in grief for one simple reason, and that is it requires you to be inhuman. I'll say that again. Closure is an unhelpful goal in grief because it requires you to stop being human. None of us is capable of that. Implying that it is possible or a worthwhile goal to simply close the book on a person, a relationship, a season of your life, a part of yourself, suggests that you are capable of a black and white compartmentalization that just isn't a thing that humans are capable of doing. When I picture closure as a concept, I see like a closed box labeled grief that is like all tied up with a beautiful bow and put over there, never to be opened again. But people are messier and more fluid than a tidy box with a ribbon. We are not capable of tying up our pasts with a pretty bow, putting it over there, and moving on as if nothing has ever happened to us. As a matter of fact, so many grievers that I work with in Life After Loss Academy and beyond who have faced major losses do not want to live in that kind of segregated world where grief lives over there and we live over here. Grieving people will often say things like, how am I supposed to pretend that my marriage never happened? Why would I want to leave my dead sibling in the past? Even if I wanted to forget the abuse I endured, I can't. I carry its impact with me every day. Or, that job changed my life. I will always remember the skills that I learned there. If your grief is ongoing, you are not a failure. If your grief is ongoing, that is proof that your loss mattered deeply or that it impacted your life in a significant way. It is also proof that you are human. And in a society that says you need to let it go, you need to move on, you need to find closure, I know, and you know, because you're listening to this episode, that healing is not about letting go or moving on or boxing up your grief. It is about learning how to carry grief with you each and every day, folding, integrating grief into your life instead of insisting it sit over there in the corner. When we make closure the goal of our grief experience, we set ourselves up for an impossible standard. We ask our nervous system to forget what happened. We demand our hearts amputate attachment and renounce attachment to everything and everyone we have ever been tied to. And we force our memories to quiet down and shush on command. And once again, that is not how humans operate, especially after a loss. Research in psychology also supports this. There is something called the continuing bonds theory, which is widely accepted in modern grief research, and it tells us something wonderful. Healthy grieving does not require severing ties. Instead of detaching, which is kind of what closure demands of us, many people adapt to grief by forming a new kind of relationship with who or what they have lost. So for instance, they might talk to a person who has died or create meaningful rituals on grief anniversaries or every day. They might carry values or lessons forward with them into the future, or they might make decisions with a loved one or a historical event, a loss, in mind. They honor the impact of their past relationship as they move forward into the future. And this is not a denial of grief, again, like closure would insist you do. It is a folding in, an integration of grief, known in many grief circles as, I've said it already, integration. And the process of integration in life after loss is so very different and honestly so much healthier than closure. Here's the problem with asking, how do I get closure in the aftermath of a major loss? So when someone types into a search bar, like how to get closure, what they often mean is, how do I stop hurting like this? Or how do I stop replaying what happened? Or how do I live with unanswered questions? Or how do I move forward without betraying the person or the thing that I lost? And I want you to notice something important in all of these questions. I wonder if you can guess what it is. I'm going to pause for 2 seconds and see if you can guess. Can you get there? Okay. None of these questions actually requires you to get closure. How do I stop hurting? How do I stop replaying? How do I live with unanswered questions? How do I move forward without betraying who or what I lost? None of those are actually about closure. What they require instead of closure is skills, grief support, lots and lots and lots of self-compassion, and most importantly, permission to grieve in a way that doesn't demand the closing of a chapter. When you search for closure, whether on Google or elsewhere, it can be a form of self-rejection in your grief. So that could sound like, if I were stronger, I would be over this by now. Or if I were grieving right, I would feel resolved. Or if I could just find the missing piece, I would finally feel okay. It takes all this pressure to find closure and turns it into shame on top of you. But there are many losses that do not come with neat explanations or tidy resolutions. Some relationships do not get final conversations. Some endings are abrupt or ambiguous or unfair. Even if your loss was neat and tidy, a long life well lived, or a relationship where both people are able to separate with no hard feelings, that sounds like magic to me, grief still comes along for the ride. Regardless of how your relationship ended, there are still things to mourn and futures lost and identities changed. Closure suggests certainty, but grief lives and has always set up house in uncertainty. And healing from grief is not about eliminating uncertainty or like erasing that thing out of your life. It is about increasing your capacity to live alongside or with uncertainty. So this is what you've been waiting for in this episode. How do I heal without closure after a loss? Because if closure is not the goal, then what is? In my online community, Life After Loss Academy, which is open 365 days a year, I teach something called the 5-step grief method, and you can listen to past episodes of Grief Grower to learn about the grief method, what's included, all that jazz. One of the most powerful steps, especially in conversations about closure, is the third step, the letter I, integrate. And in Life After Loss Academy, I teach that integration means weaving your loss, folding your loss into your life story, instead of trying to cut it out or compartmentalize it and put it over there. And so here is what healing without closure can look like through the lens of the grief method that I teach inside of Life After Loss Academy. That stands for G, ground, R, release, I, integrate, E, establish, F, foster. And this is the series of lessons that I teach in Life After Loss Academy. So first, let's talk about grounding, feeling safe and secure and stable in the world again. Before you can fold grief into your life, you have to feel safe enough to experience it. So when you're grounding, instead of finding closure, this looks like creating rituals and routines that help you feel centered and stable in the midst of uncertainty. Any grounding practice stabilizes your nervous system so that it doesn't feel like grief is running the show of your life. And it also, this is my favorite part about grounding, it gives you a secure and stable place to come back to in all the seasons of your life when grief gets overwhelming. I'm thinking like a major milestone, getting activated in the grocery store, seeing someone who doesn't know your person is dead, for example, and you're like, I am overwhelmed. I need to go back to what feels safe and stable. That is why we practice grounding first. And you do not need closure to find ways to feel steady in grief. You just need anchors that support you as you keep moving forward alongside your grief. Number 2, release. In Life After Loss Academy, part of integration is releasing the life that you thought you would have. This is the part that people often confuse with closure, but releasing, or letting go, if you want to use like how society would phrase it, this is not about erasing what happened, or never thinking of your person again, or never considering your loss folded into your life again. It is giving all the emotions of your grief a compassionate and healthy way to be expressed. So when we talk about releasing inside Life After Loss Academy, I walk you through how to grieve the future you imagined, the version of yourself that existed before, and the roles and identities in your life that have shifted or changed or died as a result of loss. And I often say that you may need to practice releasing again and again and again. We let go in our lives many, many times. Again, this is not because something is wrong with you. It's because grief is not linear, it cannot be contained, and it keeps showing up in different ways and in different flavors across your life. The third module in Life After Loss Academy is called Integrate, and this is where we talk about how do we fold in our loss in our life through the lens of continuing bonds. So instead of asking, how do I find closure? You might ask instead, how do I stay connected to my loss in a way that feels nourishing instead of excruciating? We've talked about this a little bit before in this episode, but this could look like creating rituals on dates that are meaningful to you, or speaking to your person when you need some guidance, or living out shared values like empathy or humor or education, or displaying photos or keepsakes intentionally in your home or in a place where you can appreciate them, or making decisions that honor what mattered the most in your relationship. You are not required, huge underline here, you are not required to detach from your loss in order to heal from it. In fact, you are allowed to carry grief forward in ways that mean something to you. You might think I'm stopping here, but I'm not, because I want to talk about the fourth module in Life After Loss Academy, which is called Establish, and this is where I talk about doing grief with other people. The first 3 modules, Ground, Release, and Integrate, are all about how do you do grief with yourself? How do you as a grieving person exist and survive in the world? The fourth module acknowledges that grief never happens in a vacuum, and we are always doing grief in the presence of other people, friends, family, coworkers, and they all have something to think or say about our grief. Some of them are supportive, some of them are not supportive. And so one of the biggest things we do in the Establish module of Life After Loss Academy is talk about establishing boundaries around closure culture. Say that 5 times fast. Because one of the most exhausting parts of grief is managing the fact that other people are uncomfortable with the fact that your grief keeps going. It has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with you, but they don't like that. So when someone says, don't you think it's time for closure? Or maybe you just need to move on. You are allowed to respond with something like, I'm not looking for closure. I am learning how to live with loss. And in Life After Loss Academy, we invent all kinds of scripts and all kinds of boundaries and all kinds of protective mechanisms, tools that you can use in conversations with people to say, I am not interested in doing grief that way. I am doing grief this way. And establishing those kind of boundaries protects your healing process from the societal pressure to find closure or pretty up your grief or set your grief over there and never look at it again. And it is one of my all-time favorite parts of working with grievers inside the course and the community. Finally, the last step, foster, is all about how we cultivate or foster a long-term relationship with grief. Because if grief is not a chapter to be closed or an unpleasant part of yourself to wrestle into a box with a bow and put over there, what is it? Inside Life After Loss Academy, I teach that grief is a lifelong companion. Sometimes it's loud, sometimes it's quiet, but it is always present, that accompanies you, comes along for the ride for the rest of your life. And when you stop trying to push grief into the tiny box of closure, you free up all of your energy to consider how you and grief might co-create something together. This could be meaning, this could be purpose, this could be connection, this could be joy even, as you find your way forward. So instead of living in spite of your grief, you learn how to live alongside of it, and that can open up hundreds of doors you may not have even considered before, opportunities for hope or peace or healing that don't ignore your grief, but instead fold it in along the way. All without closure, you can find ways to ground through grief, to release grief's heaviest emotions, to integrate your grief into your life, to establish grief-honoring relationships with other people, and to foster a long-term relationship with grief. That is pretty incredible, if I do say so myself. And I'll say this again at the end of the episode, but if you're interested in joining us in Life After Loss Academy, the doors are always open, and you can join us at any time by checking out the link in the show notes. Before we go today, I want to give you some FAQ on closure and grief, just sort of a rapid fire, common questions people ask about closure and grief, and my thoughts about them. First one is, do you ever get closure after a death or loss? And what I will say to that is, like, some people experience moments of peace or acceptance or resolution. There are people who are living with loss, but these are not permanent states, peace, acceptance, resolution. They also do not erase the love or the longing that existed before. So instead of closure, many grieving people experience and choose to practice integration, which is the ability to live fully while still missing and carrying forward who or what was lost. So I don't think it's possible to get closure because closure is not real. It demands we be robots, but you can find other ways of living with loss that are, dare I say, as comfortable or even more comfortable or meaningful or fulfilling than the process of trying to find closure may be for you. Number 2, is closure necessary for healing? No. Very shortly said, no. There is no evidence that emotional closure is required for healthy adaptation after loss. Many people heal by maintaining ongoing bonds, what we call continuing bonds, and finding meaning. Again, not by detaching completely from their loss. If you would like to learn more on this, there is an incredible article from What's Your Grief? You can search for continued bonds on their website, and there is, I'd say, a good mix of like 5 to 10 different support articles about continuing bonds theory, and it is a great resource to learn more about the concept of continuing bonds if you're really excited about that. Number 3, what if I never got to say goodbye? This is one that hits me in the heart because I did not get to say goodbye to one of the people that I lost that I talk about often, my best friend Tammy. This is one of the most painful parts of so many people's losses. You may not have had the goodbye you wanted. You may not have had one at all, whether this is surrounding a death-related loss or a relationship breakup. What I will say is that healing can still happen. A goodbye may never get to happen, but you can create rituals surrounding the goodbye, like letters or rituals or conversations spoken out loud. And the absence of, like a tie it up with a bow final moment, does not disqualify you from being able to heal from grief and loss. It is still possible to integrate your grief into your life, to fold it in, and to rebuild after loss without that final tie it up with a bow moment. Number 4, why on earth do people push closure so much? Said in short, this is a larger conversation, but the short is because grief makes people uncomfortable. And our society still separates, both legally and socially, grief from normal life. If you'd like to have a good example of that, you can look at bereavement leave policy in the workplace, or the idea that it's not quote unquote appropriate to discuss grief over dinner. I think that the world that we live in right now likes the idea of closure because it gives us the illusion of control. It makes grief feel contained and less threatening. And when someone tells you to seek closure, they may be trying to reduce their own discomfort with grief and not necessarily support you in your grieving process. I think grief would be so much easier for everyone, society thinks, if we could just be done. But that is not how grief works. Last question here. What should I try to find instead of closure? As I mentioned before in this episode, what you are seeking is steadiness, compassion, integration, support from people who get it, and who understand that grief and love and healing can all coexist. If you are looking for a place to start, Life After Loss Academy has on-demand video lessons that take you through the 5-step grief method, GRIEF, for folding loss into your life. Many of them also have journaling exercises, and you will also get once a week grief coaching online with me, and the replays are always available if you cannot attend live. What I want to offer to you today is this. If closure feels effing impossible, there is nothing wrong with you. Your grief is not asking to be closed. I do not know of a grief that has ever asked to be closed. Your grief is asking, just about all the time, to be seen and recognized and honored. There is a part of you, I bet, I'd put money on this, that understands that healing is not about sealing the door or tying up your loss with a bow. It is about building a larger life around everything that you lost. This kind of life is one where grief is not shut away or quarantined over there, but has a place of meaning at the ever-growing table of your existence in this world. Last invitation here. If you are ready to stop chasing closure and start learning how to integrate your grief into a meaningful, steady, and hopeful future, that is exactly what we do inside Life After Loss Academy. You do not need to be done remembering. You do not need to erase what happened, and you do not need closure in order to heal. You need tools and support and a clear framework that allows grief to continue to exist while you rebuild alongside of it. And that kind of healing is absolutely possible. I have seen it now for more than 5 years inside Life After Loss Academy. You can learn more about the community, read student reviews, and join me when you are ready at shelbyforsythia.com, and under the little Work With Me tab there, you will see Life After Loss Academy, or you can check out the link in the show notes. Closure is not real. Pass it on. That's all for this episode of Grief Grower. Thank you so very much for joining me today. If you're looking for grief support beyond this show, you can find free workshops, blog articles, and my new What's Your Grief Supporter Strength quiz at shelbyforsythia.com/links. And if you'd like to get support from me for your unique loss experience, join us in Life After Loss Academy, my online course and community. I'll walk you through my 5-step grief framework, GRIEF, ground, release, integrate, establish, and foster. And you can get live coaching from me every single week to answer your questions. Replays are always available if you can't attend live. It is just $33 a month to join, or $22 a month if you're a marginalized or financially stressed griever. You can cancel at any time. If this podcast felt validating, comforting, educational, or otherwise helpful to you, please subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And be sure to share Grief Grower with a friend, because you never know what someone you love is going through. Grief Grower is hosted by me, Shelby Forsythia, and the theme music is composed by Addie Goldstein. Until next time, Grief Growers, I see you. I am so proud of you and the work that you're doing in the world. And I love you. Because even through grief, we are growing.